Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of this YouTube channel, Hiie, Somatics. My name is Hiie. I am a somatic movement educator and a performer and a writer. And today we have with us a very special guest, Kim Jureckson, who is joining us from Lancaster, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Close to Philadelphia. And I'm in Paris, France. And let me say a few words about Kim, and then Kim can share more of her movement background with us in just a second. So, Kim is a choreographer and a dancer and a movement educator, and has really a long story with movement and different types of fitness movements and dance practices. And one of Kim's specialties, and this is the reason why we are here to listen to her carefully, is seated movement. Today's episode is dedicated to movements that we can do in seated positions, and particularly in a chair. This is about the magic of moving in a chair. So, Kim, welcome to this show, and tell us about how you found your way to seated movement.
First of all, thank you, Hia, for having me today. Um, I can say that as a choreographer, I have had a lifelong fascination with chairs. Um, I look at a chair, and depending on the size, the shape, the color, the position of the chair in the room, it immediately starts um, giving me a movement idea, a movement story. I feel like a chair is sort of like a silent partner in a way. So I've used chairs a lot, many times in my choreography, um, just to set a mood, excuse me, or tell a story. So that just became a very natural progression for me as I began teaching, and especially as I moved into teaching the population I'm working with at the moment, which is the late 70s till close to 100-year-old population. I found that chairs are such a wonderful way to introduce movement to people.
No, Kim, oh my God, I love this because I didn't realize that you have, as a choreographer, like for you, chair is a creative tool. I want to ask you something about it, but I don't know what to ask exactly. Like, how do you come up with, tell us something about like chair choreography? Like, what is fascinating to you there? Or how do you find a way for the body to connect to the chair in your choreographic works? Or maybe you have some examples of how a chair began to tell a story.
Um, okay, let's see. Um, well, one piece that I did, I rarely use pop music, but I am a huge Beatles fan, and I really wanted to choreograph a piece to Eleanor Rigby, and so and this was for like just a little private showcase. It was just sort of an in studio performance, basically. Anyway, so I decided to use two gold chairs, which you'll see a little bit later in the in the podcast as if I move the screen back. But I decided to use two gold chairs and two dancers who started sitting in the chair facing each other. And the idea was that they were almost a mirror of each other, and they moved in sync in the beginning, sort of telling the story, and then it progressed to the chairs moving different places, the dancers using the chairs in different ways, including above their heads, almost sort of making a cage around them. So I just kind of use the chairs in lots of different ways to give myself a jumping off point for movement. We didn't dance we didn't sit in the chair the whole time. We didn't use the chair the entire time, but the chairs kind of reoccurred throughout the piece.
Yes, I love the inspiration that you're giving us for treating the chair really as a silent partner and as a creative partner also. Let me tell you a little story here myself also. The reason why I am so fascinated with the seated movement is that recently, like a month ago, I was diagnosed with a voluminous herniated disc, and so it was, which paralyzed partly one of my legs. And so it was very hard for me to move about for a month or so, and every step that I took was very painful. And so immediately when I found out about this injury, it occurred to me I need a chair. And so I went online and I looked for a chair, and it wasn't just whatever kind of chair or like a practical looking chair. I was like, okay, it has to be sturdy enough. It has to, but it also needs to have a certain kind of look. I want to have a red chair. It's very
Yes,
like an emotional
yes,
investment also. And then when my chair was delivered to me, I'm so glad I bought it online because I was not supposed to carry anything heavy. And so when my chair came, I was like, oh, this is my new friend. And really,
yes.
every day I took my chair out, I put it in the middle of my room here, and I still continue doing that also, time in my beautiful red chair. So,
I can relate to that.
you can,
Yes.
oh, so good. We're on the same page. Maybe later also, later you'll tell us like what kind of chair to actually buy also, like what kind of chair is good for movement purposes to explore. Yes. If you do you
Sure.
have any advice, do you have any advice about that also right now even? Like
Um,
it shouldn't have like tell
it
us
should,
what kind of chair
I would just say, yeah, I think what you were going to say. I prefer a chair with no arms because it that limits your movement and limits your ability to use your arms if the chair has arms. So I prefer a chair with no arms. I prefer a sturdy chair. I know it might not be the most comfortable all the time, but the more cushioned it is, the the harder I think it is to find your alignment. Because part of the reason why I love starting on a chair to teach some of my movement classes is I find it's a really wonderful way to find the alignment of your spine more so than standing up, because you can if your chair is sturdy and not too squishy, you can feel your sits bones. You can feel where you should be sitting. You can find that place that engages your core. If you're too far forward, if you're too far released downward, you don't feel that. So it's a good way to just sort of tap into that basic alignment on a chair that's firm, I would say.
Neat. Do you recommend also like these wobbly chairs, wobbly stools? Is that what you use also? Kind of
I
ergonomic?
I know what you mean. I actually bought I think they're called disco seat or disc no or disco sit, and it's sort of like a cushion that you blow up, and when you sit on it, you may even have one. Yes, exactly,
Oh
that's
yeah, I
exactly
use
it.
this one. It's great.
Yes, yes, it sort of massages you. And I did get those for my class of my senior movers, but I found that for some of them it worked, but for some of them it was actually dangerous. They I had one gentleman who almost lost his balance and fell off the chair. So it takes more than you think to be able to sit on that and still feel that you're safe and secure as you're moving around. So I kind of let that go for that particular group of people. But personally, I love those. I have that exact same one, and I do love using that. It does help you find that alignment so clearly.
Yes. Yes, I use one because my physical therapist recommended this for my spine actually and for the
Yeah.
hernia.
Yes.
Now, Kim, tell us about how and why you use seating movement in your classes. So if somebody, me or somebody else, we come to your class, what is it that we see? Give us a vision of your class.
Vision. Okay. Well, another thing that I love about chairs is that it levels the playing field, especially in a group of um, people who are not comfortable moving their bodies
Mm.
either because they're older and haven't moved in a long time, or maybe that was just never in their wheelhouse, so to speak. You know, they did other things. Maybe they played a sport, but sort of organized movement, especially if you add music to it, that was just not something they experienced before. But if you start everyone seated in a chair, that is something that is universally understood. Everyone knows how to sit in a chair. Everyone feels comfortable sitting in a chair. And then before you know it, you are introducing them to different movements and they're moving. And nobody is saying, I can't do this, or, I can't dance, or I have two left feet. That everybody just feels comfortable and supported and secure because they're on a chair. So for me, that really opens up a lot um, to what you can bring to the class without feeling like people are resisting or already telling their negative stories of, oh, I was never good at dance, or I was the one who nobody ever asked me at the sixth grade dance, but whatever's going through their mind. It just takes that all out of the equation. So that's why I love to start at least with movement on a chair, and then that's a great springboard to standing movement as well.
Mm. And so what kind of, I so agree with you. I think the chair is really great for shy movers, also timid movers, who,
Mm,
because I think for a lot of people, if you introduce the constraint, so to speak, of seated instead of
yes,
moving about in space, they're like, oh, I
yes,
can do this, like what you were
yes.
saying. Because I think a lot of people get those who are not used to dance, they just the idea of moving about in space is
It's frightening.
they don't know how to do it and being in the beat and da, da, da. But if everybody's in a seated, or it can be one-on-one also, it doesn't have to be a group setting,
Right.
then I think it calms people down immediately, actually.
It
It's a
does.
stepping stone also for somebody who wants to dance but feels too timid to actually move about in the space, or is like, I can't improvise, I don't know what to do. So I think that's very important. Now, are there any other benefits also of seated movement?
Yeah, I think you can experience some types of movement that even if you are a younger person and is in fairly good shape, you can experience certain movements seated in a chair that are much more challenging, or perhaps you wouldn't even think of trying standing up. For instance, you could do some off center work seated in a chair, where you're literally tilting the body to the side and maybe taking a foot or feet off the ground, something you might not choose to do standing, but it's very possible to do it in a chair. Um, I think reaching other spaces, reaching back spaces, and spiraling. Um, there's there's a lot of aerobic work you can do seated in a chair as well. If you use your feet and legs and you use some light weights in your hands, you can feel definitely that you got a cardio workout and you never stood up. It's all possible. So I feel like a chair, there's almost no limits to what one can do in a chair.
Yes, I think I agree with you, and it's amazing how little we know about the potential of the chair for movement purposes. Do you think mm, so? What populations is chair good for? You mentioned older people, but do you also would you recommend it to other generations also, like young people, kids, for example, also children?
Yes, yes, that's actually that's an excellent thought. I my experience teaching younger children um, was more of a general movement or creative movement type class. I did not use a chair for that, because mostly because I was teaching at a traditional dance studio at the time, and that was just not, there weren't chairs available, so I didn't think about using them. But now that I have two grandsons, one 4 and one 6, yeah, I could see seated movement working as well. Again, a way to sort of um, give them some boundaries, but also great freedom at the same time of possibilities that could happen using a chair.
Kim, it just occurred to me as I was listening to you that maybe one reason people don't try so much seated movement. Many reasons, actually. But one of them maybe is that we just don't know what to do. Like we lack ideas. Like, okay, I put some music on, but how do I move? If I were to come to you, so one obvious way to be connected to seated movement is to take classes with somebody like you, for example, online or in person or privately, for example. But let's say let's say there's nobody in my neighborhood, for example, who provides this kind of service. How can I want to try some seated movement? How do I know what to do? How do I start exploring? How would you how would you encourage such a person who comes to you and feels like they don't really know how to? Okay, maybe for one session they come up with something, but how do I keep exploring so that it's interesting for me, not just once, but as a practice, actually?
Hmm, good question. um, do you think I should perhaps just show you a little bit of movement that
Absolutely.
can
Show us.
sort of talk you through it? And maybe that would just sort of spark some ideas and a realization that there's really there really aren't any limits, and there really is no right or wrong either, as long as you're not hurting yourself
Yeah.
or falling off the chair, of course. um, there's really no limit to what you can do. So I'll give you a little demonstration. Okay, now let's just see if this is going to work. If I tilt this, can you see that? Can you see me?
Perfect. I'll put you in a speaker view so we see just you. This is perfect. Yes, if you go back a little more, then we see the toes also.
Oh, hold on. I'm going to tilt this just a little.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
that's too much now.
No, is it too much?
If you go with the arms to the ceiling, then it's a little too much.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, Ma, this should be perfect.
I can go back a little bit further.
All right, now we see everything. We see your
Okay.
legs, your
Okay. Okay. So, for instance, I might start with something like this, where I'm just beginning to loosen the spine and get some movement through the pelvis. So I might just do some scooping out and arching forward and scooping out and arching forward. Just a few of those. Oh, I think my computer popped again. Sorry.
Mhm.
And then I might take that into a body wave, forward and up. And just leading out with chin in the chest, letting the body just roll through. And maybe one more, just a gentle roll through. And then I would maybe bring shoulders into this, where we just gently move the shoulders, maybe bringing elbows into that. And arms reaching through. That's it. Excellent. And then maybe taking a melt forward, which gives you a bit of an inversion where you're dropping down. If you take the arms back, you can actually take that into a swing where you can drop and rebound a little and swing it back up. Yeah. Releasing forward and swinging up. Beautiful. And you could even do a side drop. And scoop. And side drop. And scoop. Just releasing. Using a space hold with one arm. And up and open. Good. And then maybe legs a little bit wider on the chair. And I just call this a body circle. It doesn't have to look like anything in particular. And maybe reversing that circle around. Just again, now we're opening the hips a bit. And reaching through with the arms. Let it melt down all the way to the floor. Again, it's a good way to get the heart higher than the head in a safe way because you're safely seated on the chair, but the head releases all the way down and bringing it back up again. I'm just a little bit speeding through these things. Then you could perhaps bring the legs back together. Many seated stretches. You can bring one leg up, get that nice crease in the hip, rolling the foot and ankle. And if your leg doesn't come this high, you can hold under the thigh and keep your leg very low to the ground. It's still supported. You can still move the ankle and foot because feet are very important to balance, no matter what age you are. And then from here, we might extend the leg all the way out onto the floor. Same arm as leg, could reach upward. Nice inhale on the exhale, reaching towards the toe. You can round the back or lengthen the back, whichever feels good to you. And breathing up, bring the arm down. You can bring the leg in again, little nice flexion in the hip, and perhaps extend the leg outward, little quadricep work as you reach and release. And then I would do that on the other side, same thing. Another good seated stretch is bringing one leg up if it's available. This is a harder one for some people to do, but if you cross at the ankle and take a slight lean forward, you get a lot of information in the outer part of the hip and thigh. It's a good piriformis stretch. And you could back that off into a crossed leg position. And this is a very good way to do some basic spiraling in a chair, either way towards the leg or away from the leg. And undo that. And then, of course, I would do that whole thing on the other side. There's also exploring a little bit of off-center movement. For instance, if one leg extends outward, you could tilt the body to the side. If you felt comfortable, you could lift that leg off the ground and just have that moment of suspension. And then perhaps taking it over the other way and a little bit back and a little bit over to the side. Yeah. And again, just quick switch. Same thing, a little off-center tilt. Leg could be up or down. It could remain on the ground. And stretching over. This gives the body a nice feeling of being supported, but what does that feel like to come off of one center and back? Another thing I find, especially with my older population, children and younger people jump frequently, and they can have a moment where their feet are off the ground. As we get older, most of us rarely jump. So another thing that can be done in a seated position is literally just pushing the feet off the ground. And you just have that, just a little moment of, you can add arms, but just a little up and down movement. It helps you engage the core, but it just gives you that little moment of freedom, of almost like you're flying. Again, if that's not possible, you can just lift the heels off the ground. The toes can remain. You can have that same little bit of buoyancy under the armpits and just feeling lighter and freer with your body than you might normally feel. You could go a little bit bigger with the whole thing and into spiraling movements where you could actually turn on your chair. You could use the chair in the back to help you have a center spiral, and coming back the other way, same thing. The chair kind of can be helpful. You can sort of hold on, maybe get a little bit extra work there. And if you wanted to be even a little bit more daring, you could do a spiral where you bring your pelvis off the chair and you use the chair just to sort of help you achieve that. You can add an arm if you want to, and it just gives a nice feeling, but you're always coming back to the chair. So you're just there for a moment, and then you're returning to kind of your safe, supportive partner who's always there for you if you need them, him, her, whatever. And then what I normally do after as much seated movement as I'm going to do in the class that day is transfer that to standing. But I think I mentioned aerobic work. One little demonstration. If you do a little march with your feet. Doesn't have to be a high thing like this. Just keep the feet going. You need to sit forward on the chair so that you are using your core, lengthening your spine, nice long feeling through the top of your head. If you take your arms out and, for instance, do little circles, but you keep those legs marching, reversing your circles, the feet have to keep going. If you use weights in your hands, this would be a little bit more challenging. If you use a light weight, you could bring the arms forward and you could do something like little crosses. You got to keep those legs going. Then you can kind of learn a little pattern. And you can bring the arms up. You could keep that going for a long time with the arms and the legs going. If you're really wanting to do more, you could do a little pattern where it's almost like a seated jumping jack. Out and in, out and in, out and in. You could add all kinds of things. Opposite arm and leg, reaching. You could pull one elbow back, make it a little bit more work, a little bit more fun. It doesn't end. It doesn't end. You can do so much. And you're pretty tired by the end of that. If that keeps going, you feel like you got a little bit of a workout. So that was a little demonstration.
Wonderful. Oh, Kim, that was wonderful. Yes, you feel the energy moving right away when you do something. Kim, as I was watching you and following along, I had a question also. What was my question? With your older students, do you sometimes also like teach them choreographies that it's almost like a dance, but it's in a seated position?
I do. What I usually do is teach them a foot pattern when we're seated. And then later in the class, we stand up. Those who feel that they can. We stand behind the chair, hold on if necessary, and then we do the foot pattern. So, for instance, I'll do one more quick demonstration for you. Hold on. Okay, let's see if it'll stay there. Okay, so for instance, we might do something like step together, step, touch, step together, step, touch, step, kick, march, 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 step together, step, touch, step together, step, touch, step, kick, march, 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 march. It might just be something simple like that. But the challenge then is, like I said, we'll learn it seated so that everybody can see, everyone can do this. There's not anyone in the class, even my almost 100-year-old dear friend Romaine can do this in a seated position and feel like you're part of it. Then I would put on music, and those who can stand would be probably behind the chair. Move back a little bit. Probably behind the chair, maybe one hand on the chair. Some people won't need any. And we'll just do the same thing, but we'll do it with a little bit more energy. March. If you don't need your arms, we might even add little arms with it. Step, kick, march. Whatever, but it's a simple pattern. You can stay behind the chair the whole time. You can do it with holding on with hands. You don't need to use hands. You can do the whole thing very supported by the chair so that you're balanced and you feel safe the entire time. So that's just a tiny demonstration, but we do many things like that.
Great. Now, I don't know if you want to, I have another question.
Sure.
Remember a little while ago, you mentioned that in a seated position, we might explore movements that we wouldn't think of exploring in a standing position, for example. And so one of the movements that you did, for example, was so cool. I was like, yes, I wouldn't do that one in a standing position. It really felt challenging. Do you have any other examples of these kinds of movements that are different and interesting for people who actually could also, in terms of age and their mobility and health, do a lot of movements in a standing position?
Okay. Here's maybe one other thing. This one I would not be doing with my older population, but Let's go back here again. But if you turn sideways on the chair, again, you need a chair. It should have a relatively high back. A really low back chair also isn't totally desirable, but there's a lot of work that you can do. Things that, I mean, you can do this on the floor, of course, but harder to get more of that feeling of almost floating. But again, you're well supported by the chair. So that type of thing is also, it's a lot of good core work, a lot of good core work. Because sometimes even younger people who are in good shape, a lot of times people don't do well on the floor for some reason. They either, the idea of being on the floor is weird, or sometimes it's just people's hamstrings or hips are so tight that even trying to sit in any way on the floor isn't all that comfortable for them. Again, a chair makes that a lot easier because you're not asking your hips to rotate that far or your knees to bend that much, but you can still get a lot of the same quality and benefit out of the movement.
And I want to I'm sure the viewers saw this by themselves also, but I just want to point out that look how beautiful and graceful these movements were also. For example, the one that Kim just showed us, and many of the earlier ones too. So it's not only, what I want to say is that the movements in a chair can also give us a sense of grace and beauty that are important for, maybe not for everybody who's in the class or wants to move, but for a lot of us, that's very important also. Like, oh, I can do a movement that fills me with the sense of beauty and grace.
Yes, I agree. Because again, regardless of age, a lot of times I'm amazed at how many people, unless they've taken a dance class or some type of a movement class along the way, really have a hard time isolating different parts of the body. I'm amazed at how many, especially older people, cannot move just their shoulders. That it took me a long time to get people to, I'm not sure what I was getting, but they just couldn't seem to feel that movement in the shoulders. Another one is movement from the pelvis. Like that was, again, like a foreign thing. What do you mean I'm tilting my pelvis? But and standing up doing something like that, you feel awkward. But if you're sitting on a chair and you ask people to pull the lower back to the back, towards the back of the chair, and maybe wrap your arms forward like you were hugging a beach ball or a tree, rounding the body, dropping the chin a little bit, looking towards the belly button, and then coming back up. They're doing it. They're moving their pelvis. And it just was a natural thing because they didn't have to think so much about, what do you mean? Just, I don't know how to tilt my pelvis. So that's why I feel like the chair is the great equalizer. And it does really help you to find all those nuances in the body, whether it's more fitness related movement, like like doing weights. I mean, that's, to me, that's much more exercisey. Or if it's a flowing movement of some sort, you can combine all those things together and you can have a pretty good workout without ever standing up.
And we need that a lot of the times also. For example, the weather is bad, or I don't know, something we are injured, or there are many
Yeah,
reasons why we might find ourselves at home sometimes and lack movement. And so there you go. You have fewer excuses for not moving.
it's true. And actually, I think it, I mean, I'm kind of making this up, so please don't anyone quote me on this, but I feel like if you start in the chair and if you start in the chair and you are moving in such a way that you've sort of sent the message to your brain, okay, I'm not in my recliner with my feet up. We're doing something, because you've sent that message by lengthening the spine, by breathing, by doing all those movements that we did in the beginning. You've now like woken your body up and your brain is ready to do something now. And you might have thought when you started, I'm very tired, I don't feel that great today. But sometimes after doing a chair warm up, you are actually wanting to do more. You're ready now to stand up and do more. And that might just be the jumping off point for you to go and take a yoga class or do one online, whatever, or whatever type of movement you like to do. Because sometimes I do think that moving, I think movement is medicine, but many times when we don't feel well or we have an injury or something, we kind of think the opposite. Oh dear, this isn't a day for me to do any movement. I don't feel that great, or my shoulder kind of hurts. And, granted, you need to keep some of that in mind, but many times it's just that action of getting started and doing something. And suddenly your body just wakes up and it's ready to do more. So that's my tip.
Nice. Wait a second. Getting started and doing something. When I was listening to you, I felt a strong sense of resonance also. What you mentioned about educating the brain also and convincing ourselves that we are capable of doing something. We can do something even if the body, for example, is undergoing an injury. I have an experience of that too recently because of my disc injury where, okay, the sensations in the ball of the foot and in the foot were very strange because all the nerves were there was something going on and continues to be going on with the nerve and so the nerves. And so it was very strange to be stepping with one foot that gives me correct information about the ground and the other foot that feels very strange and is also partly not able to move very well. And I remember when I was starting to do the chair work and then I put some music on. And for a lot of the movements, I did just like, okay, heel, ball, toe, heel,
Right.
ball, toe. I feel my foot against the ground. I lift my heel, I lift my toes. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was educating my brain that come on, you can do it, so that I don't in my brain stay with the sense of I'm paralyzed, I can't move. How is
Right.
this change? And so it was the movement which was physical and the muscular impact of it too, and the emotional moving with the music impact, but also I was telling my brain with the movements all the time that I can't don't stay with the mindset of paralysis during that time.
Right. That's so true. And I also tell my senior movers, I'm a choreographer. So if anything you tell me you can't do, I will have a variation for you. I can think of another way in that chair that you can approach it, that you will be able to do it. If if you cannot do a full circle, okay, then you can do one of these circles. All right, then don't lift your arm that high, but you can still move that arm. It doesn't have to go that full. There's always a variation on something. So within reason, I realize that depending on the magnitude of the injury or the age of the person, you can't always push that hard. But I find that in most cases, people can do a lot more than they ever thought they could do. They just need a little encouragement, and the chair gives them that safe starting point to feel like, okay, I can try that, and the next thing you know, they're they're rocking up and down out of their chair, and then they're adding a little arm movement, like things are happening and they're moving up and down, and they would have said, oh, I can't do that. But
Mm.
you do your basis, you do the warm up, you have them practice all of this stuff in a seated position, and it can suddenly go into places that they didn't think they could go with their bodies.
Yes. Kim, in another context, we were emailing, and I remember you said something that was so touching and profound. I just want the listeners to hear this also, and I want you to comment on this too. But you said something like in your work with with the more advanced age group, one of the great benefits of doing seated work is mm, allowing the students to connect to body awareness and self-confidence, because as we get older, it's not to be taken for granted that we feel somehow good and confident in the body. Now, this was not a very good paraphrase, but
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
uh, how you develop the sense of self-confidence and body awareness. especially in your older students, for example, through the seated movement?
Um, I think it's a combination of gaining their trust in the beginning. Obviously, if you approach any group of people, and they feel a little afraid, or that you don't really see them, or you're not really tapping into where they are, then they'll feel a little bit resistant. But if you meet everybody where they are, and you start with gentle movements, and you explain, and you use a sense of humor, um, which has, excuse me, has become easier for me. I just turned 70. So now I'm not that far away from some of the people in my class. I think my youngest person might be 76. So all of a sudden, I can say things and sort of tease them about things that maybe years ago I wouldn't have done. But now I have to go to physical therapy. I've had a shoulder problem. I've had back problems in my life. My right foot is numb many times. So I totally get all of it. Um, so I try to bring that into the class as well, and say, let's start where we all are, and we're all in this together. And our goal is to keep moving for as long as we possibly can. Once you can't get out of that chair anymore, life changes drastically. So I try to give them that confidence to know that they can do these things by the movements that we do. Our seated movement, I encourage them. I praise them when I see, progress, good work. Um, and then that's where you see the confidence coming. You just see the changes on their face. If you do something and they know what is coming, or they think to themselves, oh, we've done this before. All of a sudden, there's just this whole other way. I can see it in their eyes. I can see it through their fingertips. They are moving. This is something, oh yes, I know, we've done this before. And it's just gorgeous. It's beautiful to watch. And then they when they leave, even leaving the room, I see them walking a little bit taller. Maybe when they get out the door, maybe they slump back down. But while they're still in the classroom, they leave with a different. I think they all look younger when they leave the room, because they feel more confident, they feel more aware, they're more in their bodies. Because let's face it, if you're sitting most of the day or watching television, whatever you happen to be doing, you're not really in your body. You forget what that feels like, to move all these little parts and twist and bend and breathe. So that's what I'm trying to impart to them.
And also the joy of movement. I'm sure you feel like
Joy.
music and the joy of being in a community also, probably, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I do tease them if I ask them not to lean back in their chair to do something. If I see somebody, I'll just call them out and I'll say, George, are you leaning against your chair? And then he'll go, oh yes. And then everyone laughs, but it's a good laughter, because it's a community kind of thing, where it reminded everyone to sit up a little bit straighter and not get too comfortable in their chair. So we laugh with each other, and we not at each other, with each other. And they have told me multiple times that another part of the class they love is the laughter, because it does bring us all closer together and releases tension. And it also, we just don't take ourselves quite so seriously. It's, life is short, so you have to have a good attitude, keep moving, and laugh.
This is such a perfect conclusion. I have one question though. So this could be a conclusion, but I will add another question because
Okay.
I want to ask this question. You have actually already answered it throughout the interview, but let's see if you have anything else to add. So we've been talking about the older generation and maybe people who have injuries, for example, and sometimes they need to be doing seated more work. And so, what can people who are fully mobile and could actually be in a standing position and dance across the floor, for example? What would be some, so should they still be doing seated movement also? Now, one of the ways in which you answer the question is, yes, you can explore movements that you
Mm,
wouldn't think of exploring otherwise, but
right.
are there any other things that you want to highlight to inspire more people to, regardless of their age, to explore chair work?
Hmm. I I guess I go back to I go back more to the alignment idea that I had in the beginning. I just noticed that when you try to help someone find their alignment standing up, it seems to me that there's just so many things to account for. If the way people's knees might be slightly turned inward, or one shoulder is different than the other one, or what, and this is this would be any age group. um, Again, when for me, when I find myself in a seated position, not sitting on the floor but seated on a chair, I just feel like it is very easy, if you also if you use imagery with a person, to help them, imagine maybe their head is a floating balloon and it's just kind of floating above your shoulders, or the string image, which we've all heard, where you just feel like someone's pulling you up by the top of your head, and you can feel those rocker bones underneath you, which you can feel clearly when you rock on a firm chair, lifting the sternum versus this collapsed version. I just feel like it's easier to find that sitting than it is standing. And not that you're going to spend your whole time in a chair, but it's a good way to get in touch with that part of the alignment. And then when that transfers, sorry, into a standing, I'm too close there, into a standing position, then I think it's also easier then to integrate that once you have that in a seated position. So I'm not sure if that really answered the question.
You're reminding us that the seated work can also be really good for improving the balance and posture and reminding us of how to do it. Kim, let me ask you now, this is really maybe the final question. Um, do you have a practice with the chair yourself? In other words, outside of your classes, you also throughout the week, you go to the chair, you work in the chair yourself?
um, I would say yes. I don't know that it's um, an every day or every week kind of practice. But I definitely do go to the chair, especially if I was teaching a class or choreographing and have kind of a little bit, I usually say whacked my body out, where I can just feel that maybe the one side of my back doesn't feel as good as it normally does. Sometimes I will go back to the chair for that kind of support alignment, that kind of supported movement, or even just sometimes to do a stretch where you could use the chair this way. And what I like about this is, versus like a downward facing dog, where you can kind of fall, your ribs can sort of fall too far forward, your lower back can arch a little bit too much, you can push back a little bit too far. Using the chair in this way, I can kind of feel, I can lengthen my spine, I can feel my hamstrings, my calf muscles, everything in a little bit more controlled way than doing that in say a downward facing dog. So I do go to the chair here and there for things. And maybe as time goes by, I will use my chair more than I'm using it right now.
Which is, good to know also that, there's the option of the chair. We don't stop moving.
Right.
Kim, is there something that you want to say that I didn't ask you?
I don't think so, Here. I think you did a beautiful job
You did too.
of
So
covering the whole circle.
it's just beautiful and inspiring to watch you and to see you in movement. You're such a graceful mover and so articulate, and so we all want to run to you. So how can we find you? At least now, tell us if you teach anything online or if people can contact you for online coaching, for example, if they're from different parts of the world. And then, especially those of you who are in Lancaster. Pennsylvania. Are you open to new students?
Uh, well, right now I'm just teaching at the Long community, which is a retirement community. So the only people who can join that class at the moment are the residents from that retirement community. However, if I expand, I will contact you and let you know. You can
Yeah.
tell your viewers. Um, but that's pretty much the population that I'm working with now. Uh, and I'm also working with my dance company, but that's a different ball of wax. Although I think I mentioned to you that my dance company is now doing a joint project with the residents of the Long Home, and we are um, creating 2 or 3 movement pieces that incorporate some of my senior movers and some of my younger dancers. So, and chairs are involved.
Three different populations plus the share. That's
Plus
exciting.
the chairs, yes.
To do maybe this is a seed for thought for another interview. Also, the movement between generations and what we can learn from. I think I will write this down.
Okay.
Yeah. Intergenerational dance practices and what because yes, in dance companies, but also in movement experiences and classes, I think it's a beautiful, from what I have seen and experienced in workshops and through my own teaching, just to see how people open up through movement. It's just so heartwarming also. Like the exchanges that happen between different generations,
Yes.
different abilities through movement can be really profound and beautiful and funny and
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yes.
We've had a wonderful time with this collaboration between the senior movers and the not so senior movers. We've had a wonderful time. There's been a lot of laughter. There's been a lot of helping each other along the way, where maybe the younger dancers remember the movements better, but the older ones practice more on their own. So it's an interesting little dialogue.
Okay, I already have some ideas running. I'm like, oh, I have this question, this question. Okay, Kim, I think viewers, you're gonna see Kim again here soon. And
uh,
use your chairs, dance in your chairs, put on some music while you work even, and enjoy the support of the chair. Kim, thank you so much for coming and
you're
for
so
sharing with
welcome.
us and really beautiful to have this time with you. So, and you all, we welcome your likes and your comments and subscribe if you haven't yet, because otherwise you might miss a great interview. And so we'll see you in the next episodes.
Thank you. Thank you, Hiie. Wonderful to meet you.
Yes. Bye bye, y'all.
Bye.